In front of a high school, several professionals were setting up a magic array. Here at Western C High School, where over 100 grade 12 students were about to undergo a class transfer. The students sat upright, listening attentively to Principal Lu Yun's speech. Lu Yun was a man of few words. He hoped that each and every one of them would reach the height of their fellow student Su Qianxing and become pillars of humanity. Su Qianxing, mentioned by Principal Lu, was once a student of the high school who successfully transferred to become a revered divine holy mage. Currently, he was a prominent figure at level 80. Principal Lu often used his achievements to inspire and guide the students. As Lin gazed at the transfer array circle, which was nearing completion, his eyes flickered with a mix of seriousness and anticipation. Having been in this world for several years, he knew what kind of world it was. This world was intertwined with gaming elements, where people underwent class transfers during their last year of high school. Clearing dungeons, exploring hidden realms, joining battlefields, or slaying monsters in the wilderness. All of these activities yielded experience points, gaining experience, leveling up, mastering skills, and enhancing one's strength. Fighting against various demonic creatures, fighting to carve out a space for humanity. Countless ancestors of the human race shed blood and sacrificed their lives, which eventually led to the present way of life. The success rate of class transfers had long reached 100%. The only difference was the quality of the professions. The most popular professions in this world were undoubtedly the combat-oriented class followed by support classes, while the lifestyle classes ranked last. However, this was just a rough classification. There are also the legendary level and rare professions which were extremely rare. Here in the Western Sea City, with not a single legendary level profession emerging in the past decade. As a beam of light shot up into the sky, the transfer array circle had been fully enchanted. Lin followed the group, contemplating in his heart what profession he would transfer into. No one could accurately predict what profession they would become. Suddenly, someone tapped Lin on the shoulder. Gao Yang, wearing a smile, approached and asked what profession he wanted to transfer into. Lin glanced at him, shook his head, and didn't answer. Gao Yang continued with a smile. "Come on, tell me. It's okay to share. Let me tell you, I really want to become a knight. Just imagine, with my tall and sturdy appearance, being a knight would surely be imposing. Plus, I could protect the ladies." Lin didn't like to talk much. Despite his excellent academic performance, he had few friends. Many people thought there was something wrong with him. Gao Yang exchanged a few words with him before leaving to talk to someone else. In those brief conversations, there were voices tinged with envy and bitterness. Many people felt that Lin was too aloof and arrogant because of his good grades. Gao Yang smiled and said, "Actually, Lin just simply doesn't like talking." Unfortunately, no one believed this statement. Either way, Lin didn't feel the need to provide further explanation. The group arrived in front of the array circle, and Principal Lu walked up to an elderly man with great respect. "Master Zhang, I appreciate your help today," he said. Master Zhang had a warm smile, appearing to be a very amiable old man. He didn't conceal his information, and everyone could see it. Zhang Qian, level 52, Array Grandmaster. Lin was slightly surprised to see that he was an Array Grandmaster, and his level was an impressive 52. Array Grandmasters were considered rare support class professions and were not commonly seen. Moreover, they possessed tremendous power. Soon, Principal Lu Yun brought out a list and started reading off the name of the students. The first student called was Shu Da. Shu Da responded and entered the transfer array with a hint of nervousness. As the array roared to life, accompanied by a dazzling light, Shu Da's class transfer concluded. Lifestyle profession, farmer. Shu Da's face turned slightly pale. He hadn't expected to become a farmer. It was still a decent profession since everyone needed to eat, right? After stepping down from the array, Shu Da's close friends comforted him. The second person called hurried into the array. Again, a dazzling light enveloped the scene. Lifestyle profession, chef. The student was pleased with his profession because his father was also a chef. It could be seen as following in his father's footsteps. The third, the fourth. One person after another went up for their class transfers, and most of them ended up with lifestyle professions. Master Zhang and Principal Lu Yun sighed. So far, not a single rare profession had appeared. Master Zhang stood beside Principal Lu as the architect of the transfer array, and he was well aware of the class transfer situation. Lu called out another name. Charlotte responded promptly. Before setting off, Charlotte glanced at Lin, her eyes flashing with a hint of provocation. She and Lin were known as the two geniuses of the high school. However, in terms of academic performance, Lin always outshines Charlotte, who remained in second place. Charlotte had always held a grudge deep inside. She refused to accept defeat. Master Zhang, who had been keeping his eyes closed, suddenly opened them and glanced at Charlotte. This girl is impressive. Master Zhang detected that Charlotte's spiritual power was more than twice as strong as an average person's, indicating the potential for her to become a mage. The array activated, and a radiant light enveloped the scene. In the midst of the light, two enormous fireballs suddenly rose, bursting like fireworks. Lu Yun trembled with excitement. An anomaly! A rare profession! The appearance of the anomaly indicated the emergence of a rare profession. Rare profession. Elemental mage. Lu's excitement at this moment was overwhelming. Just a moment ago, he had been mentioning rare professions as a mere wishful thinking. Principal Lu and Master Zhang were both delighted. After Charlotte returned, a group of classmates gathered around her, bombarding her with questions. This was a main combat class profession, and moreover, it was a rare class. Lin heard his name and lifted his foot, walking towards the array. Charlotte watched Lin, her eyes filled with a sense of challenge. Principal Lu glanced at Master Zhang beside him and asked, "How is this child?" Master Zhang calmly replied, "Academic performance and class transfer do not necessarily correlate. You knew this." Lu obviously understood, but he still held on to his expectations. The array activated, erupting in a brilliant light. The once bright sky suddenly darkened, and in the blink of an eye, dark clouds covered the heavens. Chilling winds blew in from all directions, causing the temperature to plummet. Day turned into night, as if doomsday had arrived. Lu exclaimed in astonishment, "What is happening?" Master Zhang fixed his gaze on the array and calmly said, "An anomaly." "A class transfer anomaly?" Lu nearly exclaimed in surprise. Such a massive class transfer anomaly was unheard of. With that, he became agitated. With such a significant anomaly, not having a rare profession would be unacceptable. Charlotte clenched her fist. This anomaly was much greater than the one before. She felt a sense of unwillingness to admit defeat, but judging solely from the anomaly itself, she couldn't help but acknowledge its significance. Suddenly, a student shouted, "Look, there's a movement within the dark clouds." Everyone looked up. Within the dark clouds, flickers of lightning could be seen. Apart from the lightning, there seemed to be something else. Moreover, a crackling friction sound emanated from the dense clouds, causing discomfort in their ears. Finally, a sharp-eyed student caught sight of what was within the clouds, and he was so frightened that he fell to the ground. The dark clouds were filled with countless skeletons. As his words trailed off, the entire scene within the dark clouds was fully revealed. Thousands upon thousands of skeletons stood densely packed, and the flickering flames were the soul fires within their skull. They all slightly bowed, paying their respects to their master. One of the soul fires descended from the sky and landed on Lin. Subsequently, all the anomalies vanished in an instant, and everything returned to normal. Unique hidden class, Necromancer. It was not just a rare class, it was a hidden class, and it was a uniquely hidden class. This meant that there was only one of this class in the entire world. Unless Lin died, there would never be a second person with the same class. Among the students, there were those who congratulated him, those who were puzzled, those who were jealous, those who were disdainful, and those who were afraid. Despite feeling excitement about his unique and hidden class, Lin showed no outward emotion. He believed that emotions should be kept hidden. "Wait a moment," Master Zhang called out to him as he passed by. Lin turned around and saluted Master Zhang. This was the first time Master Zhang had encountered such a class, and he wanted Lin to demonstrate his skills. After checking his attributes, Lin found that besides the basic attributes and level, he had two skills. The first skill was Summon Skeleton Warrior, with 7 levels ranging from Black Iron, Bronze, Silver, Gold, Diamond, Legendary, to Divine. Currently, he could only summon a Black Iron skeleton. The second skill was Soul Flame, which allowed him to burn the souls of his targets, with the power depending on his own spiritual strength and level. Knowing that demonstrating the Soul Flame skill would not be appropriate, Lin chose to summon a Skeleton Warrior instead. Activating the skill, a black vortex appeared beside Lin. Then, a Skeleton Warrior engulfed in flames of soul fire emerged from the vortex. His spirit energy instantly dropped from 20 points to 10 points, consuming half of it. The Black Iron-level Skeleton Warrior had gray bones, with numerous cracks all over its body. Even the sword it held was worn and tattered, seemingly salvaged from a heap of junk. The Skeleton Warrior had attributes of 15 across the board, but it didn't possess any additional skills. With the 4 main attributes evenly balanced, the Skeleton Warrior had neither strengths nor weaknesses. It currently lacked any skills and could only perform basic attacks. As the Skeleton Warrior appeared, the students couldn't help but exclaim in surprise and instinctively took a few steps back. People always have a certain level of fear towards terrifying things. Master Zhang's fingertips emitted a gentle glow as he touched the Skeleton Warrior. Instantly, the eyes of the Skeleton Warrior emitted a red light, and the flames of the soul fire within it flickered intensely. Lin noticed that the system detected the Skeleton Warrior being attacked and asked if he wanted to counterattack. If no choice was made within 10 seconds, it would automatically retaliate. Lin quickly recalled a piece of information in his mind and immediately commanded the Skeleton Warrior not to move. This surprised Master Zhang, who was level 52, while Lin was only at level 1. The fact that his summoned creature exhibited hostility towards him was unexpected. However, Master Zhang held high expectations for Lin's future and encouraged him to work hard. The Skeleton Warrior followed behind Lin, making clicking sounds and accompanied by chilling gusts of wind, adding to its eerie atmosphere. As Lin was returning, many classmates unconsciously distanced themselves from him. Only Gao Yang approached him. He expressed a desire to touch the Skeleton Warrior, and Lin nodded in approval. Gao Yang gathered his courage and reached out to touch the Skeleton Warrior. It had a touch similar to steel plates, giving off a cold sensation. It was soon Gao Yang's turn to undergo a class transition. Lin looked at the Skeleton Warrior and silently thought, "Recall." A vortex appeared in front of him once again, and the Skeleton Warrior entered the vortex, disappearing from sight. The system displayed that his summoning space now showed 110 capacity. Lin carefully examined the description of the summoning space. The summoning space served as a place to store summoned creatures. Unused summoned creatures could be kept in the summoning space and summoned whenever needed. Summoned creatures called from the summoning space did not require the consumption of spiritual power. As Lin reflected on his class transition, he recalled the vision he witnessed during the process, a vision that was completely different from what others experienced. He saw a dragon, a colossal dragon. The dragon soared through the air, emitting cries of agony from time to time. In an instant, it descended to the ground and thrashed about madly. Lin observed countless skeleton warriors crawling all over the body of the dragon, numbering in the thousands. The skeleton warriors wielded their blades, continuously striking the dragon's body. Each blow inflicted terrifying wounds upon the dragon. No matter how the dragon struggled, it was futile. The transition formation erupted in a brilliant light. Gao Yang's class transition was complete. Advanced Melee Class, Sword and Shield Knight. It turned out that Gao Yang had become a knight, just as he had hoped. Gao Yang excitedly ran back, and for a rare moment, Lin showed a hint of a smile, and even gave Gao Yang a thumbs up. Gao Yang burst into laughter, patting Lin's shoulder. "From now on, we'll tackle dungeons together. I'll stand in front of you." "In that case, let me recall the phrase." Then he tapped his head and said, "If someone want to kill me, he would have to step over your corpse first." Lin was speechless. He couldn't bear this guy anymore and finally spoke up. "You got it in reverse." Gao Yang was taken aback and started laughing. You finally spoke up. I deliberately said it in reverse. Didn't you notice? Lin gave Gao Yang a disdainful look. Finally, all the students completed their class transitions. Principal Lu congratulated everyone once again, and tomorrow their newbie dungeon would be open to all students. The details of the newbie leveling dungeon were known to almost everyone. The monsters inside were concentrated between levels 1 and 8. Moreover, their numbers were few, and the difficulty was low. Charlotte stopped Lin. She wanted to challenge him to see who would achieve better results in the final exam. Lin looked at her with a puzzled expression. He nodded and bypassed Charlotte. She took it as Lin's acceptance of her challenge. Lin returned home. The house was empty, devoid of any presents. He picked up a photo frame and looked at it. The furnishings in the house were very simple, with hardly any furniture. One photo stood out prominently. The photo featured Lin, a young and beautiful woman who was his sister, and an elderly woman with gray hair who was his grandmother. There was a knock on the door from outside. Lu Yun stood there with a package. He had brought some supplies for Lin's daily needs. Lin accepted the food and thanked Principal Lu. Over the past year, Lu Yun had been sending food supplies every few days. It was a promise he made to Lin's sister. Last year, Lin Mohan was admitted to Xiajing Academy as the top scholar in the Western Sea City. However, at that time, Lin Mohan didn't want to go because she wanted to stay behind and take care of her younger brother, Lin. Once she went to Xiajing Academy, she wouldn't be able to return for at least 3 years. Principal Lu tried so hard to convey her to attend the academy and promised to take care of Lin personally. After waving goodbye to Principal Lu, Lin went on experimenting his new class. He opened his stat window and checked his 2 skills. Suddenly, a sudden anomaly occurred within the system. The system detected Lin awakening as a necromancer and initiated a binding process with the most powerful talent system. As a result, Lin was bestowed with a new talent, a comprehensive enhancement that amplified all his skill effects by 5 times. In addition, he gained a passive skill called Damage Transfer, which allowed him to redirect all damage he received to his summoned creatures. But both of these can be considered OP skills. The power of this talent is so strong that Lin can no longer accurately describe it in words. Lin activates his skill and summons a black iron-level skeleton. A vortex appears in front of him. At first glance, this black iron-level skeleton in front of him is no different from the one he summoned in the afternoon. Its appearance hasn't changed much, just like the one that came out of the garbage heap. However, its attributes have undergone a tremendous transformation. It has increased from its original value of 15 to 75. The next day arrived quickly, and Lin arrived at the entrance of the newbie dungeon. It wasn't just students from his high school who came to the newbie dungeon. Almost all students in Western Sea City who had completed their class transfers would come here. All of them know that if they formed a team, the experience would be evenly distributed. Based on the advice of the senior players, soloing was recommended for dungeons below level 10. Principal Lu walked over and said that except for Charlotte and Lin, all main combat classes needed to bring support roles for the dungeon. Someone asked, "Why don't Charlotte and Lin need to bring support?" Principal Lu replied, "Charlotte is preparing to apply to Xiajing Academy, and as for Lin, you can ask him if he needs any support." Several support players shook their heads in disagreement. Most of those who chose support roles were girls. These girls were terrified when they saw Lin's skeletal warriors and had no intention of forming a team with him. Lin informed Principal Lu that he also intended to apply to the Xiajiang Academy, making it clear that he did not want to form a team. Principal Lu was surprised by this revelation because one of the requirements to enter the Xiajiang Academy was a minimum level of 12. Lin only had a week to level up from his current level to 12, which would be quite challenging. Lin didn't say much, only expressing his confidence. Before entering the dungeon, Charlotte challenged Lin, saying they would compete to see who could level up faster. Lin neither agreed nor refused, remaining non-committal. Charlotte huffed and tilted her head back, revealing her slender and graceful neck. "If you don't answer, I'll take it as a yes," she declared. Lin released 4 skeleton warriors and commanded them to find and kill monsters. The four skeleton warriors dashed off in different directions. Weaker monsters were quickly slain, and notifications kept appearing as the skeleton warriors continuously found and killed big-eared bunnies. In less than half an hour, Lin reached level 2. He summoned several more black iron-grade skeleton warriors and noticed that their movements formed a map. He looked around and discovered some overlooked monsters. Activating his skill Soul Flame, he instantly killed the level 2 monsters. Soon, Lin reached level 3 and continued summoning more skeleton warriors. Even level 5 monsters were easily dispatched by the skeleton warriors. Lin didn't even need to lift a finger. He simply waited for the experience gains. In no time, he reached level 4. Outside the dungeon, Principal Lu and Charlotte's father were chatting. They mentioned that Su Qianxing and Lin Mohan both reached level 5 in the beginner's dungeon. Charlotte should be close to that level as well. They were all aware that each person automatically exited the dungeon after 12 hours, so it's difficult to get higher level. Xia Dongyang changed the topic and mentioned Lin. He was shocked knowing Lin awakened as a necromancer. He knew dealing with the undead and the deceased inevitably evoked unsettling thoughts in most people's minds. As Lin continued to level up rapidly in the dungeon, 7 hours had passed, but he had yet to encounter an 8th-level monster. However, he noticed that the skeleton warriors could only stray up to 500 meters away from him. Any monsters on the path were instantly slain by the skeleton warriors. After walking for a while, the terrain of the dungeon finally changed. The grassland came to an end, and a forest appeared ahead. Just as he entered the forest, a tree branch lashed out at him with great force. The branch, appearing like a whip, struck Lin, but it didn't cause any harm. His passive skill was in effect, transferring all the damage he received to his summoned creatures. Ahead stood a massive level 8 tree. With a thought, Lin commanded one of the skeleton warriors to attack the whipwood tree. Surprisingly, it wasn't instantly slain. He ordered all the skeleton warrior continue to attack the tree, and after 4 strikes, it fell. Looking at the dense forest with numerous level 8 whipwood trees, Lin commanded the skeleton warriors to spread out and attack the trees in different areas. Their blades kept landing on the whipwood trees, 4 strikes each, swift and decisive. Outside the dungeon, the sky gradually darkened. Suddenly, a brilliant light emanated from the entrance of the dungeon, and everyone looked up simultaneously. Lin emerged from the light. Principal Lu asked how he managed to come out, and Lin replied softly, "I beat the dungeon." Principal Lu couldn't believe his ears and eyes. Lin had reached level 7 in just 10 hours. Lin didn't provide much explanation, but simply applied to go to the outskirts of West Sea City. The shock occupied Principal Lu's mind, rendering him momentarily speechless. Seeing Principal Lu's lack of response, Lin called out to him again and waved his hand in front of his eyes. Principal Lu snapped out of his daze and instructed Lin to take a rest. Principal Lu returned to his desk, and the other principals looked at him curiously. After taking a few sips of tea, Principal Lu revealed that Lin had completed the newbie dungeon. Everyone was astonished and could hardly believe it. Lin continued to replenish his spiritual energy through meditation. By now, he had summoned a total of 24 skeleton warriors, but his summoning space still had 70 vacant slots. After a while, the 12-hour time limit was up, and the students who had entered the dungeon were teleported out one by one. Many of them wore expressions of exhaustion, but even more were filled with excitement. Charlotte emerged from the dungeon as well, having reached level 5. After exiting the dungeon, Charlotte couldn't find Lin at first. She scanned the surroundings with her beautiful eyes and finally spotted him in the distance, deep in meditation. Her eyes widened, and she stood frozen in place, seemingly shocked by the revelation that Lin had reached level 7. As Xia Dongyang waved his hand and got on the car with Charlotte, her eyes couldn't help but glance towards Lin. Xia Dongyang noticed his daughter's gaze and immediately understood what she was thinking. Charlotte snorted, her eyes burning with determination. Xia Dongyang smiled, but also informed Charlotte that Lin had completed the dungeon and come out after 10 hours, having defeated all the level 8 monsters. On the bus, Gao Yang hugged Lin tightly and asked how he managed to reach level 7, pleading to join him in leveling up next time, in which Lin winked and said, "Sure, maybe later." The next morning, Gao Yang couldn't find Lin at the school gate. He then learned that Lin had gone to the outskirts of Western Sea City. It dawned on Gao Yang that he had been bailed by Lin, which explained why he had agreed so quickly the day before. At the Imperial Exchange District, Lin went through the identity verification process. Lin had access to the exchange, albeit with a low-level permission of only level 1. Lin checked the missions available with basic trading and gathering missions, and found one that involved clearing a level 14 dungeon. The dungeon difficulty was categorized as normal, nightmare, and hell, and this particular mission required nightmare level or higher completion. Lin shook his head. He was still too weak at the moment. The city gate guard held the exit permit provided by Lin and verified his information. Although the guard were puzzled by how a level 7 student was allowed to leave the city, the exit permit was genuine, and the city gate guard quickly approved the verification. The guard advised Lin to stay safe and cautious. As he walked out of the city gate, a cold wind blew against him. The sky immediately darkened, and a heavy atmosphere filled the air. Inside and outside, the city felt like two different worlds. Lin sensed the presence of goblins behind him and summoned his skeletal soldiers to attack the level 10 goblin. Compared to his level 7 skeleton warriors, this goblin was too weak. Lin felt excited as he summoned all of his skeleton warriors and charged towards the large goblin army ahead. He clenched his fists, feeling a surge of anticipation. At this rate, reaching level 15 before the major exam shouldn't be a problem. He then recalled how his sister had already reached level 16 before her own major exam, and he wondered how she had achieved such progress. He couldn't wait to see his sister. After a while, his level increased to 10, and his talents and skills were both upgraded. He could now summon bronze-level skeleton warriors. With his greatly increased spiritual energy, Lin eagerly summoned a bronze-level skeleton warrior. The bronze-level skeleton warrior no longer had the gray color, but instead had a pale greenish-white hue. The weapon in its hand had transformed into an axe. Its base attributes were astonishingly high, reaching 1500. Moreover, it possessed a skill called Rampage Strike, which dealt double damage to the target and had a cooldown of 10 minutes. As Lin was about to continue summoning bronze-level skeleton warriors, the sound of a breaking wind echoed, followed by several arrows flying past him. Multiple arrows flew right in front of him, and one of them struck him. His passive skill automatically redirected all the damage to the skeleton warrior, so Lin himself was unharmed. A figure dressed in black emerged from the forest, running at high speed with impressive agility. She noticed Lin and swiftly changed direction, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Judging by her attire, Lin could roughly determine the professions of her as an assassin. Then two-person appeared. They were an archer and a mage. Unable to catch the girl, they asked Lin where the person had gone. Instead of answering, Lin spoke coldly. "You shot me with an arrow. Apologize." The archer looked at the arrow on the ground, realizing what had happened, and also apologized, although puzzled as to why the arrow didn't cause any harm. The mage's expression grew gloomy, clearly unhappy about the escape. He turned his gaze to the skeleton warriors, his eyes filled with disgust, and slowly raised his staff. However, the archer suddenly pulled the mage back and walked the other way. Upon seeing the retreating figures, remarked that these two individuals couldn't be too high-leveled, probably around level 20 at most. If they were to attack him, Lin felt he might have to resort to killing. The bronze-level skeleton warriors effortlessly slaughtered the monsters in the area, as if he was mowing the lawn. However, Lin's leveling speed began to slow down. It continued until nightfall, with Lin still needing 30% more experience to reach level 11. He had no intention of going back. Time was limited, and he couldn't afford to waste it on traveling. He had to work harder than anyone else to be attend to Xiajing Academy. Lin set up a campfire in the forest and ate his food, deep in thought. He still couldn't figure out how his sister managed to reach level 16. There must be something he overlooked. As Lin pondered and recalled the memory of his sister returning from the western outskirts with injuries all over her body, he started to piece things together. He combined his knowledge from school with the information, and from the outskirt. Suddenly he realized something. The Western Sea Mine dungeon. Could it be that his sister teamed up with others to tackle that dungeon? But it was a nightmare-level dungeon. This revelation sparked his curiosity and determination to uncover the truth. He decided that once he reached a higher level and acquired more strength, he would investigate the Western Sea Mine dungeon and find out what had transpired there. Perhaps that was the missing piece to understanding his sister's rapid leveling and the secrets behind her achievements. Lin clenched his fist, feeling confident in his previous guess. The skeleton warriors remained hidden in the darkness of the night, while Lin began to meditate. In the middle of the night, one of the skeleton warriors alerted him, causing Lin to snap out of his meditation. Soon, a person appeared within his line of sight. It was the same black-clad person who had escaped earlier that afternoon. The girl asked if there was any food available, and Lin handed her a sweet potato. The girl didn't show any signs of disdain and eagerly devoured the food, revealing her face by removing her mask. She began to thank him, but suddenly broke into a violent coughing fit. While still coughing, she continued to talk to Lin, who handed her a bottle of water. After she finally managed to speak clearly, she asked for his name. However, when Lin didn't answer, she suggested they both use detection spell on each other. Lin pondered for a moment and nodded, indicating his agreement. Both of them activated the detection spell simultaneously, their fingertips emitting a faint glow as they used the spell on each other. To Lin's surprise, the detection spell failed, and he didn't receive any information about the girl. The girl suddenly giggled, displaying a triumphant expression. Although this was her first time seeing of the necromancer profession, she finally knew Lin's name and level. Her words started flowing rapidly, one after another. Lin looked at her calmly and asked, "Why?" The girl was delighted to finally hear Lin speak and responded, "Why?" Lin looked at her intently and asked the question again. The girl smiled and took out a badge-like item. It was a screening badge. As long as you wear it, anyone whose level is not more than 10 levels above yours will have their detection spells fail when used on you. The girl put away her badge, and Lin nodded before casting a detection spell again. This time, it succeeded. Ning Yi, level 19, Shadow Assassin. A gentle breeze blew, and Ning Yi's smile instantly vanished. Lin also turned to look in a certain direction. In addition to the archer and mage they had encountered earlier, there was now a knight with a giant shield. The three individuals surrounded them from different directions. Just as the girl was about to flee, an arrow shot from the darkness. Ning Yi reacted swiftly, dodging to the side in an instant. The arrow exploded with a bang, splitting into two streaks of light that fell on Lin and Ning Yi respectively. These were no ordinary arrows. They were marker arrows. Red marks appeared above the heads of both Lin and Ning Yi. The sound of a cold laughter filled the air as the mage they had encountered before emerged from the forest. They considered Lin as part of the girl's group. The girl attempted to explain that Lin had nothing to do with her, but the three individuals clearly didn't believe her. The archer on the tree chuckled and decided to kill both of them, so no one would know about their possession of intermediate skill scrolls. Ning Yi whispered, "I'll hold them off. You run on your own." Lin looked at her and asked, "What about you?" The girl didn't want to involve Lin in the danger. As a shadow assassin, Ning Yi might have been able to escape before, but now that she was marked by the archer's arrow, her stealth ability was ineffective, making it difficult for her to escape again. The mage raised his staff, preparing to attack. The staff erupted with a brilliant glow, and a massive ball of light ascended into the sky, illuminating the surroundings as bright as day. Ning Yi's hand shimmered, and a blue dagger appeared in her hand, her entire body tensing up. The archer on the tree had already drawn his bow to full, ready to shoot. The knight stood with his shield, assuming a charging stance. The mage's staff was gleaming brightly. At this moment, Lin raised his finger slightly, and a skeleton warrior appeared in front of him. The mage showed a hint of disdain and strong disgust. He shouted lightly, and a gigantic fireball, about 1 meter in diameter, materialized out of thin air, engulfed in roaring flames, and shot toward the two of them. Ning Yi's expression changed, and she immediately pulled Lin backward. But as they were retreating, Ning Yi suddenly felt a heaviness in her body, and their speed suddenly slowed down. An invisible thread extended from the mage's staff, entangling her feet. The archer also took action. An arrow was shot, but halfway through its trajectory, it split into three. Meanwhile, the knight launched his charge, rushing towards the two of them at an astonishing speed. The girl suddenly exerted force and pushed Lin away, moving him out of the range of the attack. At that moment, two skeleton warriors appeared on either side of Ning Yi. The knight collided with the skeleton warriors, but while the skeleton warriors remained motionless, the knight was sent flying backward. The archer's triple shot landed on the skeleton warriors, creating metallic impact sounds. Amidst the flames, the skeleton warriors slowly emerged, radiating a pale blue glow, showing no signs of injury. The mage, witnessing this scene, couldn't believe it. How could a level 10 necromancer's summoned creature withstand a one-shot from his level 21 fireball? The archer and the knight were also stunned, shocked by the strength of these summoned creatures. With a grating sound, more and more skeleton warriors appeared, surrounding the three of them. A total of 44 skeleton warriors formed a tight circle around them, leaving no escape. With everyone stunned, including Ning Yi, she couldn't believe her eyes. Wide-eyed and open-mouthed, she was in disbelief. She had seen Lin's skeleton warriors earlier today, and they appeared worn out and weak. How could they become so powerful? Lin, with a determined look in his eyes, walked back to Ning Yi's side, his gaze filled with a murderous intent. He uttered a single word: "Kill!" With a single thought, the skeletal warrior sprang into action. The mage's face turned pale as his hand holding the staff trembled, immediately conjuring a shield around them. He summoned an energy shield. It was the mage's signature skill. Unlike agile archers, mages were not known for their dexterity or speed. Moreover, he is now surrounded by skeletal warriors, leaving no room for escape. As the skeletal warrior raised its blade, the energy shield contorted violently. The mage's expression changed drastically, realizing that just one strike from the skeletal warrior was enough to shatter his energy shield. He can't believe that these skeletons possessed such terrifying power. What kind of attributes did they have? He didn't have much time to contemplate, as the second skeletal warrior's blade descended. The energy shield shattered upon impact, dispersing into countless twinkling stars. Out of desperation, he used resistant flame ring. The mage unleashed another skill, causing a massive ring of fire to erupt. Several nearby skeletons were instantly pushed back over 10 meters by the force of the flames. Before he could even celebrate for a moment, darkness enveloped his vision. Two skeletons had already leaped above his head, leaving him no chance to employ any more skills. As the blades glinted, the mage's head soared into the sky. In just a span of 2 seconds, the mage met his demise. The archer, currently being pursued by the skeletal warriors, wasn't having a good time either. Witnessing the mage's death firsthand, fear filled his mind. Comparatively more agile than the mage, he continuously employed evasive skills, attempting to break free from the encirclement of the skeletal warriors. However, despite his repeated efforts, they all proved futile in the end. As the skeletal warriors closed in step by step, the space available for his maneuvers grew increasingly restricted. He didn't understand how these skeleton warriors could get so fast. Compared to the other two, the knight seemed to be the only person who could hold his ground. The knight's body emitted a radiant glow, resembling a light bulb, as he repeatedly activated his charging skill and raced towards a distant location. This layer of light was even more resilient than the mage's energy shield, securely protecting him. Even when the skeletal warrior's blade struck his body, they were unable to inflict any harm upon him. Lin knew this was a limitless defense skill. Only a few knights could master this skill, recalling his knowledge of this skill. It was one of the knight's core abilities. Once activated, it granted an immensely powerful defense for a short period of time. The knight, relying on his limitless defense, desperately fled. A pained scream echoed from behind, and he knew that the archer had also met his demise. With both the mage and archer dead, he was thoroughly frightened. How could these skeletal warriors be so terrifying? If he had known earlier, he would not have come. It wasn't worth losing his life for a mediocre intermediate skill scroll. Lin had no intention of letting him escape. There's no turning back. He would need to ensure a clean kill. One of the skeletal warrior's blades emitted a red glow simultaneously. Rampage strike, dealing 200% of their own strength as damage to the target. The knight couldn't believe that a mere skeletal warrior would also use skills. The sword, shimmering with a red light, struck the knight. The bright white light surrounding the knight instantly dimmed significantly. Then came the second strike, followed by the third. One after another, the skeletal warriors ruthlessly unleashed their skills, rapidly diminishing the duration of the limitless defense. Moreover, more skeletal warriors had surrounded him, cutting off the knight's escape route. A sense of despair washed over him. After a dozen seconds, the knight, filled with unwillingness, was struck down by the skeletal warriors. Either don't do it at all, or if you do, don't hesitate. That's what his sister has told Lin, and that's exactly how Lin acted. Ning Yi still hadn't processed what had happened. From the beginning of the battle until the end, it took around 20 seconds. All three of them had been killed. Meanwhile, Lin himself hadn't even moved an inch. He simply stood there commanding his army of skeletons. The skeletal warriors had returned, carrying various items in their hands. When a person dies, the contents and items of their storage space would be dropped. The skeletal warriors had picked up everything they found. The dropped items included bronze-tier weapons, a staff, a bow, a shield, and a sword. The 4 weapons and equipment were neatly arranged in front of them. Ning Yi informed him that these are all weapons obtained from the Carmen Orc Legion's dungeon. Lin was somewhat puzzled as he had never heard of this dungeon before. Noticing Lin's confusion, Ning Yi continued to explain, "The Carmen Orc Legion dungeon is a level 20 dungeon located outside Shanghai City. These 4 bronze-tier equipment pieces are of no use to him, but he can sell them for some money." Without hesitation, Lin collected all 4 bronze equipment pieces, and Ning Yi didn't express any objection. There were also some remaining materials, such as wolf pelts, beast bones, and green sprout grass, but the quantities were not significant. Lin also didn't hesitate and collected all of them. As long as there's value, it's worth something. After collecting the weapons, equipment, and materials, only one item remained: Beginner Skill Scroll. To his surprise, it turned out to be a beginner skill scroll, which was worth about 10,000 gold and highly valuable. Lin held the scroll and pondered whether to use it himself or sell it. Ning Yi asked, "You haven't used a beginner skill scroll before, have you?" Lin nodded, confirming that he had never used one. Ning Yi noticed that Lin seemed to be considering selling it. A beginner skill scroll? It's not a high-level scroll, so it's not worth much. In Ning Yi's eyes, 10,000 gold coins seemed insignificant. Lin held the skill scroll and asked how to use it. Ning Yi chuckled. "It's simple. Just hold the scroll and say use." Lin didn't doubt her words and followed her instructions. "Use," he said. The scroll remained motionless. Ning Yi said, "Oh, wait. You know what? Your voice wasn't loud enough. You need to say use in a louder voice." Lin looked at her but didn't make a second attempt. He may not have used a skill scroll before, but he wasn't foolish. He didn't believe for a second that the volume of his voice mattered. As Lin had suspected, he figured out the method of using the scroll directly by channeling his spiritual power into it. Ning Yi looked at Lin expectantly, waiting for him to shout out the word use. But Lin never uttered a word. Suddenly, the skill scroll erupted with a brilliant light enveloping Lin. Ning Yi exclaimed in surprise, a disappointed look on her face. Lin found out how to properly use the scroll. She had intended to pull a prank on Lin, but he had discovered the correct method of usage. The skill scroll transformed into a sphere of light surrounding Lin, and an interface appeared. Acquired skill, Corpse Explosion. The newly acquired skill is read as follows: Corpse Explosion, Level 1, detonates a corpse, dealing damage to enemies within a 1-meter radius equal to 10% of the corpse's remaining health. Corpse Explosion is currently at Level 1. At first glance, the skill description may not seem outstanding. The range is only 1 meter, but Lin saw something different in it. This is an AoE skill. If he were to face thousands of enemies, relying on the skeleton warriors to defeat them one by one would be too slow. It would take too much time. However, with this skill, all he needs to do is kill one enemy. Then, he can detonate the corpse, causing damage to the enemies within the skill's range. As more enemies are killed and more corpses are formed, he can continue to detonate the corpses, one after another. Ning Yi blinked her big eyes, her face filled with curiosity, and asked if Lin have gotten a new skill. Lin nodded. Lin didn't blame Ning Yi for trying to prank him earlier. Ning Yi smiled happily, complimenting Lin's voice and hoped he could talk more often. Lin looked at her. This woman seemed different from the girls in his school. She was lively and playful. Your voice sounds nice too. Lin rarely complimented others. Ning Yi appeared delighted and took out a box, placing it directly into Lin's hands. It was an intermediate skill scroll. In the exchange market, the price of an intermediate skill scroll could reach up to 1 million gold coins, 100 times the price of a beginner skill scroll. Ning Yi had mentioned that the people chasing her were after this scroll. How could she just give it away like that? Ning Yi sat down by the campfire and extended her hands to warm them up. With the people who were chasing her now taken care of, Ning Yi felt a wave of relaxation wash over her. She had stumbled upon a stroke of luck inside the Carmen Orc Legion's camp. She found a chest that appeared randomly. By chance, Ning Yi had come across it and obtained this intermediate skill scroll. Unfortunately, those few individuals had spotted her with it, leading to her being hunted down. Lin looked at Ning Yi and waited for her to finish speaking before softly saying, "You almost died just now." Ning Yi smiled and explained that if she received a fatal injury, she would be automatically teleported away, but she still feared pain. Well, Lin realized he had been unnecessarily worried. The girl was not an ordinary girl. She had more than enough artifacts to keep her safe, so she couldn't die. Ning Yi reached out her hand and asked if there was any food left. Lin took out several steamed buns, which he obtained from the earlier battle, totaling more than 10. Ning Yi shook her head, indicating that she didn't want anything from those people. Lin chuckled and exchanged the buns for sweet potatoes. Ning Yi happily took the sweet potato and started eating it. Watching Ning Yi savoring the food, it seemed truly delicious. Ning Yi continued her questioning, and Lin answered that he intended to go to Xinjiang Academy. In her eyes, with Lin's abilities, he would have no problem passing any academy entrance exams. Suddenly, Ning Yi thought of something and told Lin that after he arrived at Xiajing Academy, he must challenge the Divine Tower and aim for the highest floor possible. The rewards for the first-time challenge would be doubled, and it would earn him a substantial amount of points. In the academy, points were more valuable than gold. Ning Yi seemed to be quite knowledgeable about Xiajing Academy and passionately explained its details to Lin. As she spoke, Lin's mind started to form a rough image of Xiajing Academy. 99% of the time, it was Ning Yi doing the talking, and Lin simply listened, occasionally responding with a sentence or two. Eventually, Ning Yi's voice faded away and fell asleep. Lin removed his coat and offered it to Ning Yi as a makeshift blanket, while he himself began to meditate. The next day, sunlight poured in. Lin's spiritual energy was fully replenished as he woke up from his meditation. Ning Yi blinked her big eyes and looked at him. With a cheerful smile, she reached out her hand, asking for the sweet potato. Lin directly handed her a piece of sweet potato, but Ning Yi felt it wasn't enough, so Lin took out another piece. Almost all of the 20-something sweet potatoes he had brought with him were given to Ning Yi, and he didn't keep a single one for himself. Lin waved his hand and said, "There really are none left." Ning Yi smiled and said, "All right, I'll believe you." Holding the sweet potato, she bid farewell to Lin, expressing her wish to meet Lin again in the future, telling him to quickly level up so he can take her on a journey and take her along to level up. Ning Yi left swiftly, taking the sweet potatoes and the coat that served as her makeshift blanket. After Ning Yi left, Lin muttered to himself, "I'll bring you along to level up in the future." The forest was permeated with a faint smell of blood. 3 corpses lay on the ground. Lin gazed at the bodies and silently unleashed the skill he had just learned yesterday. Lin walked towards the three bodies and tested his newly acquired skill. Suddenly, the body exploded. With a loud bang, surrounding trees were blown to pieces. A massive pit appeared on the ground with a depth exceeding several meters. The power was quite substantial. Lin noticed that the damage range from the corpse explosion was a full 360 degrees in all directions. The body he just detonated belonged to the mage. He did a few more tests. Once again, there was a thunderous roar, even more powerful than before. Following yesterday's thoughts, Lin headed towards the Western Sea Mine. After a night of meditation, his spiritual stats was fully restored, and Lin summoned 4 more skeletal warriors. With the skill level of summoned skeletal warrior reaching level 10, the skeletal warriors transformed from black iron level to bronze level. The demand for spiritual power also increased. Now, summoning a single skeletal warrior required 70 points of spiritual stats. Lin had a total of 300 points of spiritual stats. At this point, Lin have a total of 48 skeletal warriors. Lin was already quite satisfied. He knew someday the summoning space will be maxed out, and he wasn't in a hurry. As Lin got closer to the Western Sea Mine dungeon, he started to see people gathering around. The monsters on the way to the dungeon were mostly cleared out. Soon, Lin caught sight of the entrance to the dungeon. It was a whirlpool similar to a newbie dungeon, but much larger. The whirlpool seemed to emitting a constant aura of bloodlust. At the entrance of the dungeon, many people were waving flags and shouting, searching for team members. Several people were also gathered in front of the dungeon entrance, seemingly engaged in discussion and their plans. Lin approached the entrance of the dungeon with a single skeletal warrior. He had kept the other skeletal warriors hidden, the skeletal warrior's bone friction making a sound that sent shivers down one's spine. Many people instinctively stepped back, creating a pathway for Lin. Arriving at the entrance of the dungeon, Lin checked the dungeon information. This was the real deal, and not a newbie dungeon designed for leveling up newcomers. The mine dungeon had 2 difficulty levels, offering normal and nightmare difficulties, with no hell difficulty available. Even in normal difficulty, the monsters were already elite creatures, several times stronger than those outside. The nightmare difficulty featured even stronger elite monsters, with an even higher level of difficulty. Typically, normal difficulty required a 3-person team, consisting of a tank, a damage dealer, and a support. The nightmare difficulty required a 5-person team, with dual support and dual damage dealers. From this, one could infer the difference in difficulty. The skeletal warrior stood silently beside Lin, showing no signs of movement. Finally, someone mustered the courage to use a detection spell, and it landed on both Lin and the skeletal warrior. A red light suddenly emanated from the hollow eye sockets of the skeletal warrior, directed towards the person who cast the detection spell. This startled the person, and the detection spell yielded no results, providing no information. Lin was wearing the shielding emblem given by Ning Yi. He didn't order the skeletal warrior to take action. It was just a detection spell, nothing serious. It seemed that everyone realized Lin was not an ordinary person, and started inviting him to join their teams. However, Lin declined. After reviewing the dungeon information, he chose the nightmare difficulty. Lin was teleported into the dungeon. Many people were shocked to see him entering the dungeon alone. They couldn't believe that someone would dare to enter a dungeon on their own. Some people approached the person who had used the detection spell earlier, asking for details. The person seemed slightly embarrassed and said he didn't see any information. Outside the dungeon, many people wore expressions of curiosity, as there had been numerous cases where overconfident individuals attempted to solo dungeons and ended up dying inside. The Western Sea Mine dungeon lived up to its name, with the terrain inside resembling an actual mine. The dungeon was filled with a heavy, oppressive atmosphere, accompanied by a strong stench of blood. Standing within a safe zone, Lin knew that venturing outside would result in immediate attacks. Lin cast a detection spell, revealing the true nature of the elite goblin monster. Its attributes were several times higher than those of ordinary creatures. a level 14 goblin with 800 strength, 400 agility, 200 spirit, and 1000 GP. It also possessed a skill called Stunning Strike, showcasing immense strength and resilience. Even a level 14 knight class profession wouldn't come close to matching half of its prowess. Without proper teamwork and coordination, defeating a nightmare-level dungeon would be a daunting task. Yet when compared to Lin's skeletal warrior, the difference in attributes was still vast. Lin summoned the skeletal warrior from the summoning space, and in an instant, the room was filled with an army of skeletal warriors. Afterward, he stepped out of the safe zone, officially embarking on the journey through the dungeon. The goblin guard roared in excitement and charged at Lin, only to be met with the skeletal warrior's large axe. It was quickly dispatched with a few strikes, and Lin received a notification. You have slain a level 14 goblin guard and gained 4,200 experience. A tinge of excitement flashed through Lin's mind. The experience gained was about 10 times higher than that of monsters at the same level. Killing a single monster here was equivalent to killing 10 outside. Lin felt that he had found the right direction and immediately issued a command. The skeletal warriors swiftly rushed into the dungeon corridor with a clattering sound. Like an unstoppable army, they slaughtered their way through, and messages kept appearing. The screen was filled with rapid notifications, not only gaining experience, but also obtaining numerous items and materials. Experience began to increase rapidly, and the number of materials kept growing. A detailed map of the dungeon quickly formed in Lin's mind. The mine dungeon was exactly as its name suggested, a mine. Inside, there were many passages, interconnected in various directions. Just 5 minutes after entering the dungeon, a radiant light of leveling up appeared on Lin. He reached level 11, and upon leveling up, his spirit was fully restored. Lin immediately summoned 4 more skeletal warriors. He checked his own attributes and noticed that the increase in basic attributes had become more significant, with each level granting a boost of 20 attribute points instead of the previous 10. His spirit had also increased by 100 points. Lin understood that as his level increased, the subsequent attribute boosts would become even greater. This realization came to him after reviewing his attributes. The 4 attributes of the skeletal warriors had reached a terrifying 1,700, and this overall change was within his expectations. However, the recently acquired corpse explosion skill remained at level 1 without any changes. Lin felt puzzled as to why the soul flame and summon skeletal warrior skills had both improved, but the corpse explosion skill remained the same. He couldn't understand why. If Ning Yi were here, perhaps she would know. Lin thought of Ning Yi, the adorable girl who loved pranks and could talk endlessly. Her knowledge surpassed his own by a considerable margin. Setting aside the doubts in his mind for now, he continued moving deeper into the dungeon. Suddenly, a massive creature blocked the path. A giant wolf king appeared before Lin, and the detection spell revealed it to be the Mine Wolf King, an elite boss with surprisingly high attributes. Lin encountered a boss-level monster for the first time, and it was an elite boss at that. Surprisingly, its 4 attributes were even higher than those of a skeletal warrior. Such a degree of strength was expected in a nightmare difficulty dungeon. The crimson eyes of the Wolf King locked onto Lin, emanating a bloodthirsty aura. However, in the end, it was just a wolf. Lin gave the command to attack, and the skeletal warriors swiftly charged towards the Mine Wolf King. The Mine Wolf King let out a fierce roar, unleashing its skills. A powerful shockwave erupted from its mouth. The leading skeletal warrior was sent flying by the impact. The remaining skeletal warriors who were unaffected by the shockwave used their skills, delivering rampage strikes. The skeletal warriors who hadn't been knocked back had already reached the Mine Wolf King and began slashing at it with their glowing red blades. The Wolf King howled in agony. Many skeletal warriors leaped high into the air, landing directly on the Wolf King's body and activating their skills with red glows. This scene closely resembled what Lin had witnessed during the day of his class transition. The skeletal warriors also had slain the mighty dragon in such a manner. The Mining Wolf King went into a frenzy, rolling and repeatedly crashing its massive body against the rocky walls of the mine, attempting to shake off the skeletal warriors clinging to it. It unleashed its roar skill once again, sending the surrounding skeletal warriors flying. This time, it used all its strength, maximizing the impact of the knockback effect. Suddenly, the Mind Wolf King turned around and limped towards the passage. Lin was slightly taken aback, as he hadn't expected the dungeon boss to flee. The Mind Wolf King ran into the passage, howling all the way. Something seemed off about the situation. Feeling that something was amiss, Lin didn't order the skeletal warriors to pursue. Instead, he had them retreat to his side. The iron doors on both sides of the passage swung open amidst the Mind Wolf King's howls, and bloodthirsty wolves emerged from behind the doors. Under the detection spell, the attributes of these wolves were revealed. Level 14, blood wolves with 600 strength, 600 agility, 200 spirit, and 1,000 health. Although the individual attributes of the blood wolves were not particularly strong, their sheer numbers, totaling at least 100, were enough to send chills down one's spine. However, Lin was not afraid. Despite the large number of mind-blood wolves, their attributes were not high, and his skeletal warriors were more than capable of dealing with them. With a single strike, a skeletal warrior easily sliced one of the wolves, granting Lin both experience and wolf skins. A graceful smile formed on Lin's lips, and a radiant glow appeared in the palm of his hand. Corpse explosion! With a deafening roar, the bodies of the mind-blood wolves were detonated. Not a single wolf could withstand the amplified damage that was 5 times more powerful. Instant kill. Undoubtedly, it was an instant kill. In an instant, notifications flooded the screen. Within the blink of an eye, Lin's experience skyrocketed from 32% to 72%. At that moment, the Mind Wolf King hobbled back, its eyes filled with terror. Conveniently, there were several blood wolf corpses at its feet. Lin's gaze turned cold, and a faint light flickered in his palm. Corpse explosion! Boom! 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 3 consecutive explosions simultaneously engulfed the 3 corpses. Screams resounded, and the Wolf King let out a final lament. After a few staggering movements, its massive body crashed to the ground. Lin gained 15,000 experience, as well as the Wolf King's fangs and low-level monster crystals. Lin continued down the winding passage, encountering a number of goblin-like monsters along the way. With a sweeping gesture, the skeletal army charged into the mine pit. Faced with the onslaught of skeletal warriors like a tide, these enhanced elite monsters were powerless to resist. One after another, they were slain. Although the enhanced elite monsters were formidable, they also offered generous experience and abundant materials. Lin pondered that in the future, when he could solo in hell-level dungeons, the experience gained would likely be even greater. Continuing along the passage, Lin cleared out the monsters along the way. With a few rounds of nightmare difficulty, it wouldn't be a difficult task to reach level 16, or even levels 18 or 19. Lin knew he is one step closer to seeing his sister. Thought of Lin Mohan made Lin smile, a rare sight indeed. The final boss of the mine dungeon sat in the center of the mine, its massive mouth continuously inhaling and exhaling air. The sound of its breath was like thunder, reverberating through the vast mine cavern. This boss seemed completely unaware of the events happening outside. It appeared to be asleep. Lin cast a detection spell, revealing the Goblin King, a boss-level monster at level 16. Its strength and HP reached an astonishing 3,000, and it possessed 3 skills. This final boss, with significantly higher attributes than the skeletal warriors, was awakened by the detection spell. It slowly opened its eyes and locked its gaze onto Lin. Then, with a roar, it leaped into the air, wielding a giant cleaver and bringing it down towards Lin's head. The cleaver carried a terrifying gust of wind as it descended. Lin attempted to dodge backward but still got hit. His passive skill triggered, transferring the damage, and Lin furrowed his brow. He felt the skeletal warriors had all been injured, their bones displaying fine cracks. Shockingly, 2 of the skeletal warriors were obliterated, turning to dust. He quickly retreated while the remaining skeletal warriors rushed in front of him, protecting him. Rampage strike! The skeletal warriors unleashed their skills, launching powerful attacks that inflicted immense damage upon the Goblin King. Lin stepped aside, contemplating what had just happened. The effect of damage transfer was to transfer the damage he received to his summoned creatures. All summoned creatures would share the damage equally. It suddenly became clear to him. The reason why the skeletal warriors were simultaneously injured and suffered significant damage from the previous attack was mainly because his own attributes were too weak. His base HP and defense attribute was too low. Facing the Goblin King with 3,000 strength, the damage he received would be immense. The transferred damage was based on his own attributes, disregarding the skeletal warrior's defense. All of that damage was then transferred to the skeletal warriors, resulting in their injuries. He shook his head. Although the skeletal warriors were strong, he was their only weakness. If they faced a powerful enemy who decided to abandon engaging with the skeletal warriors and instead focused on continuously attacking Lin, he would be in danger as well. Damage transfer was not invincible. Now that he knew his weakness, Lin naturally sought ways to compensate for it. While a single skeletal warrior couldn't contend with the Goblin King's overwhelming strength, he had an entire legion at his disposal. He proceeded to summon several new skeletal warriors to join the battle.